The Dollmaker's Curse. Kayla's eyes sparkled with delight as she entered the quaint, old toy shop nestled in the heart of the small town. The shop was a treasure trove of childhood wonders, with shelves lined with wooden trains, delicate porcelain figurines, and plush animals of every kind. But what caught Kayla's eye was a beautifully crafted doll, sitting serenely on a velvet cushion in the window display. The doll had porcelain skin, rosy cheeks, and deep blue eyes that seemed to glimmer with a life of their own. Her dress was made of fine lace, and her golden hair was styled in perfect ringlets. Kayla felt an immediate connection to the doll, as if it were calling out to her. "Mom, can I please get this doll?" Kayla asked, her voice filled with excitement. Her mother smiled indulgently. "Let's go inside and take a look." The shop's bell chimed as they entered, and a kind-looking old man with silver hair and spectacles greeted them. "Welcome to my shop. How can I help you today?" Kayla pointed to the doll in the window. "I'd like to get that doll, please." The old man's eyes twinkled behind his glasses. "Ah, the dollmaker's masterpiece. A fine choice, indeed." As he carefully handed the doll to Kayla, a shiver ran down her spine. She brushed it off as excitement and hugged the doll close. Her mother paid for the doll, and they left the shop, Kayla grinning from ear to ear. At home, Kayla named her new doll Gabby and placed her on a shelf in her bedroom. She couldn't wait to show Gabby to her friends. However, that night, strange things began to happen. Kayla was jolted awake by the sound of soft whispers. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, and looked around her dark room. The whispers seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Her eyes darted to the shelf where Gabby sat, illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the window. For a moment, Kayla thought she saw the doll's eyes glint with an eerie light. "Just my imagination," Kayla muttered to herself, pulling the covers up to her chin. She eventually fell back asleep, but the uneasy feeling lingered. Over the next few days, Kayla noticed more strange occurrences. Objects in her room seemed to move on their own. She would find her toys in different places from where she had left them, and once her bedroom door creaked open on its own. The whispers continued at night, growing louder and more insistent. Kayla tried to tell her parents about the strange happenings, but they dismissed her fears. "It's just a phase," her father said. "You have a vivid imagination," her mother added. But Kayla knew something was wrong. She began to suspect that Gabby was more than just a doll. One afternoon, while playing with her friends, she asked if they had heard any stories about the old toy shop. "I heard the dollmaker was a strange man," said one friend. "Some say he practiced dark magic." "Yeah," another chimed in. "They say he put spirits into his dolls." Kayla's heart raced. Could it be true? Was Gabby possessed by a malevolent spirit? Determined to find out more, she decided to visit the toy shop again. The bell chimed as she entered the shop, and the old man greeted her with the same twinkling eyes. "Hello again, young lady. How are you enjoying your doll?" Kayla took a deep breath. "I've been hearing whispers at night, and things in my room move on their own. Is there something special about Gabby?" The old man's expression turned serious. "There are many stories about the dolls made by the old dollmaker. Some say he imbued them with life using dark magic. But those are just old tales." Kayla wasn't convinced, but she nodded and left the shop, clutching Gabby tightly. That night, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. As she lay in bed, the whispers returned, louder and more menacing than before. She pulled the covers over her head, but the whispers seemed to seep into her mind. Slowly, She peeked out and saw Gabby standing at the foot of her bed, her eyes glowing with an unearthly light. Kayla's breath caught in her throat. The doll's lips moved, and a sinister voice filled the room. "Kayla, you belong to me now. You will do as I command." Kayla tried to scream, but no sound came out. She felt an overwhelming force take hold of her mind, compelling her to obey. The doll's eyes bore into hers, and she felt her willpower slip away. "Come closer," the voice commanded. Helplessly, Kayla got out of bed and approached Gabby. The doll's eyes seemed to grow brighter, and the whispers intensified, wrapping around Kayla like a dark shroud. "You will do as I say," the doll continued, its voice cold and commanding. "You will carry out my will." Kayla's mind struggled against the force controlling her, but it was no use. She was completely under the doll's spell. She watched in horror as her hands moved on their own, picking up a sharp letter opener from her desk. The voice in her head urged her on, filling her with dark thoughts. "Do it, Kayla. Let the darkness consume you." Tears streamed down Kayla's face as she fought to regain control. But the doll's power was too strong. She moved through the house like a puppet, the letter opener gleaming in the moonlight. Suddenly, a thought pierced through the haze of her mind. The dollmaker's dark magic might be controlling her, but there had to be a way to break free. She focused all her energy on one desperate act of defiance. With a scream of pure willpower, Kayla hurled the letter opener at Gabby. The blade struck the doll, and for a moment, the whispers stopped. The doll's eyes flickered, and Kayla felt the grip on her mind loosen. But the victory was short-lived. The doll's eyes glowed brighter, and a new voice, deeper and more malevolent, filled the room. "You cannot escape me, Kayla. I am the dollmaker, and you are mine." Kayla's eyes widened in terror. The spirit of the dollmaker had possessed Gabby, and now it was trying to take over her as well. She felt a cold presence envelop her, pulling her into a darkness she couldn't fight. As the last of her resistance faded, Kayla felt her consciousness slip away. The dollmaker's spirit entered her body, merging with her mind. She was no longer Kayla, but a vessel for the dark force that had haunted the town for generations. The next morning, Kayla's parents found her sitting on her bed, Gabby in her arms. Her eyes were vacant, and a strange smile played on her lips. "Good morning, mother, father," she said in a voice that wasn't her own. "I have a lot of work to do." The parents exchanged worried glances, but before they could speak, Kayla stood up and walked out of the room, the doll clutched tightly to her chest. In the years that followed, strange occurrences plagued the town. Children disappeared, and whispers filled the night air. The quaint old toy shop closed its doors, but the darkness that had once resided within its walls had found a new home. And as for Kayla, she became the new dollmaker, continuing the dark work of the spirit that had taken over her life. The dollmaker's curse lived on, passed from one generation to the next, leaving a trail of terror in its wake. The Collector's Curse. The old mansion loomed before Harper like a silent sentinel, its darkened windows and ornate facade casting long shadows in the late afternoon sun. She clutched the iron key tightly in her hand, her heart pounding with a mix of curiosity and unease. The mansion, once belonging to her estranged Aunt Beatrice, had been left to her unexpectedly after her aunt's sudden passing. Harper had heard whispers of Beatrice's strange obsessions, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to uncover. As Harper pushed open the heavy oak door, it creaked ominously, revealing a grand foyer adorned with antique furniture and dark wood paneling. Dust motes floated in the air, illuminated by the rays of sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The air was thick with the scent of old books and aged wood, and she felt an unsettling chill creep down her spine. Harper's attention was immediately drawn to the vast collection of antique dolls that filled every available surface. The dolls were meticulously arranged on shelves, tables, and display cases, their glassy eyes staring blankly into the room. Each doll was unique, dressed in intricate Victorian-era clothing, with porcelain faces and delicate hands. Some were small and delicate, while others were life-sized, standing sentinel-like in corners and alcoves. Fascinated, Harper moved from doll to doll, admiring their craftsmanship. However, as she wandered deeper into the mansion, she couldn't shake the feeling that the dolls were watching her. Their expressions seemed to change subtly, their eyes following her movements. She dismissed it as a trick of the light, but the sensation was unnerving. In the library, Harper discovered an old leather-bound diary. The pages were yellowed with age, and the handwriting was spidery and uneven. The diary belonged to Aunt Beatrice, and as Harper read, a sense of dread began to grow. June 14, 1893. I have finally perfected the ritual. The spirits are restless, but they will soon find their new homes. Each doll will house a tormented soul, bound to me for eternity. Harper's hands trembled as she turned the pages, the entries becoming more frantic and incoherent. Beatrice had been obsessed with summoning spirits, using the dolls as vessels to trap them. Each doll in the collection held a tormented soul, a prisoner of Beatrice's dark magic. October 2nd, 1894. The dolls whisper to me in the night. They are angry, restless. I fear I may have made a grave mistake. Harper felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. The dolls weren't just antiques. They were cursed, each one a vessel for a tortured spirit. She glanced around the room, the doll's eyes seeming to glint with malevolent intent. She had to get rid of them. That night, as Harper lay in the ornate four-poster bed that had once belonged to her aunt, she heard the whispers. Soft at first, barely audible, but growing louder and more insistent. She sat up, her heart racing, and saw the dolls in her room had moved. They were closer to the bed, their expressions twisted into sinister smiles. Panic surged through her, and she leapt from the bed, racing to the library. She had to find a way to break the curse, to free the tormented souls trapped within the dolls. She rifled through Beatrice's books, searching for anything that could help. Hours passed, and the whispers grew louder, the dolls inching closer with each passing moment. Desperation set in as Harper realized she had no choice but to destroy the dolls. She gathered them into the grand parlor, their eyes gleaming in the flickering candlelight. She doused them with kerosene, her hands shaking as she struck a match. But as she was about to drop the match, the dolls sprang to life. They swarmed her, their tiny hands clawing at her skin, their porcelain faces contorted with rage. Harper screamed, struggling to free herself, but the dolls were relentless. They overwhelmed her, their strength far greater than she could have imagined. They tied her to a chair, their whispers filling her mind with darkness. "Join us," they hissed. "Become one with us." Harper's vision blurred as the dolls dragged her to the center of the room. She felt the heat of the fire as they set the collection ablaze. Flames roared around her, and she felt her skin blistering, the pain excruciating. The last thing she saw before the darkness consumed her was the doll's eyes, glowing with a malevolent light. When the fire finally died down, the mansion stood silent once more. The dolls, untouched by the flames, returned to their places, their expressions serene. Among them stood a new doll, its face scarred and twisted, its eyes reflecting a deep, unending torment. The spirit of Aunt Beatrice had claimed another victim. Harper's soul was now trapped within the new doll, joining the collection of tormented souls that filled the old mansion. The whispers continued, a chorus of despair echoing through the halls. The collector's curse had claimed yet another life, and the mansion's dark legacy lived on, waiting for its next unsuspecting victim. The Haunted Dollhouse. When Bryce and Kelly received the vintage dollhouse as a family heirloom, they were both delighted and intrigued. It was a beautiful, intricate miniature mansion, complete with tiny furniture and porcelain dolls, each room perfectly detailed down to the smallest item. The dollhouse had belonged to Bryce's great-aunt Margaret, a woman shrouded in mystery and rumored to have dabbled in the occult. Though the couple brushed off the old stories as mere folklore, they couldn't shake a slight feeling of unease. They set up the dollhouse in their living room, marveling at its craftsmanship. Kelly loved the way it added a touch of charm to their home, while Bryce was fascinated by its history. They spent hours arranging and rearranging the miniature furniture and dolls, lost in the nostalgia and whimsy of their new centerpiece. But soon after they set it up, strange events began to occur. At first, it was small things: lights flickering, cold drafts in rooms with no windows open, and objects moving from where they had been left. They tried to ignore it, blaming it on the quirks of their old house, but the disturbances grew harder to dismiss. One night, Kelly was sitting on the couch, reading a book, when she glanced at the dollhouse and noticed something odd. One of the miniature dolls, a tiny woman in a green dress, was lying on the floor of the dollhouse living room, her porcelain limbs splayed awkwardly. "Bryce, did you move this doll?" Kelly called out. Bryce walked over, shaking his head. "No, I haven't touched it since we set it up." "Why?" "It's just lying here on the floor. It wasn't like this before." Bryce frowned. "Maybe it fell over on its own." Kelly shrugged, but a shiver ran down her spine. She picked up the doll and placed it back in its tiny chair. That night, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. The next morning, Bryce tripped on the stairs, twisting his ankle badly. As Kelly helped him to the couch, she glanced at the dollhouse and saw that the same doll in the green dress was lying on the floor again, in almost the exact same position Bryce had been in when he fell. "That's weird," she murmured, her unease growing. She told Bryce about the doll, but he dismissed it as a coincidence. "You're overthinking it, Kel. It's just a doll." But Kelly couldn't let it go. Over the next few days, she began to notice more instances where the dollhouse seemed to predict real-life events. A miniature plate fell off the dining room table, and later that day, Kelly accidentally dropped and shattered a dish in their kitchen. A tiny bed was overturned, and that night, they were both plagued by restless sleep, tossing and turning as if trying to escape unseen forces. Kelly decided to do some research into the dollhouse's history. She found an old journal among Aunt Margaret's belongings, filled with cryptic notes and strange symbols. The journal spoke of a witch who had cursed the dollhouse to torment her enemies, trapping their spirits within the miniature walls to suffer for eternity. "Bryce, this isn't just an old dollhouse. It's cursed," Kelly said, showing him the journal. Bryce read the entries, his expression darkening. "This is crazy, Kel. You don't really believe this, do you? I don't know what to believe, Kelly admitted. But something is definitely wrong with that dollhouse. We need to get rid of it. Bryce agreed, and they decided to destroy the dollhouse. They took it to the backyard and set it on fire, watching as the flames consumed the delicate wood and porcelain. But the next morning, the dollhouse was back in their living room, completely intact, as if nothing had happened. Panic set in. They tried everything, smashing it with hammers, throwing it in the river, even burying it in the woods. But each time, the dollhouse reappeared in their home, pristine and untouched. The miniature dolls seemed to mock them with their unchanging expressions. The predictions grew more violent. Kelly found a miniature knife on the dollhouse kitchen floor, and later that day, she cut her hand deeply while chopping vegetables. A tiny car was overturned in the dollhouse driveway, and that evening, Bryce narrowly avoided a serious accident on his way home from work. The dollhouse's control over their lives tightened like a noose. Kelly became increasingly paranoid, unable to sleep or eat properly. Bryce grew obsessed with breaking the curse, spending hours poring over Aunt Margaret's journal and ancient occult texts. One night, Kelly woke to find the dollhouse glowing with an eerie light. She approached it cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The dolls inside were moving on their own, their porcelain faces twisted into grotesque smiles. The tiny woman in the green dress was now standing at the edge of the dollhouse, her eyes glowing malevolently. "Bryce!" Kelly screamed, but it was too late. The dollhouse seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and Kelly felt herself being pulled towards it, unable to resist. Bryce rushed into the room, his face pale with fear. He tried to pull Kelly away, but the force was too strong. The dollhouse emitted a high-pitched screech, and Kelly was thrown across the room, her head hitting the corner of the coffee table with a sickening thud. "Kelly!" Bryce cried, running to her side. Blood pooled around her head, and her breathing was shallow. He called for an ambulance, but he knew it was too late. The dollhouse had claimed its first victim. In the days that followed, Bryce's grief turned into madness. He couldn't escape the dollhouse's influence. It whispered to him in the night, filling his mind with dark thoughts and despair. He saw Kelly's face in the porcelain dolls, her eyes pleading for help that he couldn't give. He stopped leaving the house, consumed by his obsession to break the curse. He tried every ritual, every spell he could find, but nothing worked. The dollhouse remained, a malevolent presence in the corner of the room, its tiny inhabitants mocking him with their unchanging expressions. Bryce's sanity slowly unraveled. He began to see the dolls moving in his peripheral vision, their porcelain faces twisting into sinister smiles. He heard their whispers, felt their tiny hands clawing at his mind. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't escape the dollhouse's control. One stormy night, Bryce decided to make one last attempt to break the curse. He gathered all the remaining pages of Aunt Margaret's journal, piecing together the fragments of an ancient ritual. He placed the dollhouse in the center of the living room and surrounded it with candles, chanting the incantations he had memorized. The dollhouse began to glow with an eerie light, and the dolls inside started to move, their eyes glowing with a malevolent fire. Bryce felt a surge of hope, believing he was finally breaking the curse. But the dollhouse had other plans. The light intensified, and Bryce felt a dark force wrapping around him, pulling him towards the miniature mansion. He tried to resist, but the pull was too strong. The last thing he saw before the darkness consumed him was the tiny woman in the green dress, her eyes gleaming with triumph. When the police arrived the next morning, they found the house in disarray. Candles were scattered around the living room, and the dollhouse sat in the center, untouched and pristine. Bryce was nowhere to be found. The townspeople whispered about the curse of the dollhouse, the haunted heirloom that had claimed yet another victim. The mansion was eventually sold, and the new owners, unaware of its dark history, found the dollhouse charming and decided to keep it as a centerpiece. And so the cycle continued. The dollhouse remained, a silent sentinel of malevolence, waiting for its next unsuspecting victims. The tiny dolls inside watched with unblinking eyes, their expressions serene, as the curse of the dollhouse claimed yet another soul. The Guardian Doll. Tommy loved exploring the small, antique shop that stood at the edge of their rural town. The dusty shelves were crammed with oddities and relics from the past, each one holding a story waiting to be discovered. One rainy afternoon, while his parents chatted with the shopkeeper, Tommy wandered towards the back of the shop, drawn by a peculiar feeling he couldn't quite explain. There, nestled between an old wooden chest and a stack of faded books, he found it. A raggedy doll with button eyes and a stitched smile. The doll was worn, its fabric body frayed and its clothes faded, but to Tommy, it felt special. As he picked it up, a strange warmth spread through his small hands, and he felt an immediate connection to the doll. "Mom, Dad, look what I found," Tommy called out, holding the doll up for his parents to see. His mother, a practical woman with a kind heart, gave the doll a cursory glance. "That's nice, Tommy, but it's old and dirty. Are you sure you want it?" Tommy nodded vigorously. "Yes, I want to take it home." His father, who believed in nurturing Tommy's curiosity, smiled. "All right, son, let's ask how much it is." The shopkeeper, an elderly man with twinkling eyes, peered at the doll and smiled knowingly. "That old thing? Consider it a gift. It looks like it found its new owner." Tommy beamed and clutched the doll close as they left the shop. He named it Guardian, a name that seemed to fit perfectly. That night, Tommy placed Guardian on the shelf beside his bed. For as long as he could remember, he had been plagued by vivid nightmares that left him waking in a cold sweat. But with Guardian watching over him, his sleep was peaceful and uninterrupted. He woke up the next morning feeling refreshed and happy, a rarity in his young life. "How did you sleep, Tommy?" his mother asked over breakfast, noticing the change in her son's demeanor. "Great, Mom." Guardian kept the bad dreams away. His parents exchanged skeptical glances but decided not to dampen Tommy's enthusiasm. Over the next few days, they noticed more changes. Tommy seemed more confident, less prone to the minor accidents that seemed to befall him regularly. One afternoon, while playing in the yard, Tommy narrowly avoided being struck by a falling tree branch. He swore that Guardian, who he had tucked into his backpack, had somehow warned him to move just in time. His parents listened with indulgent smiles, chalking it up to coincidence and Tommy's vivid imagination. But Tommy knew better. Guardian was special. The doll had a way of making him feel safe, like an invisible shield was protecting him from harm. He began to carry Guardian with him everywhere, much to the amusement of his friends and the mild concern of his parents. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room to watch a movie, a terrible storm rolled in. The wind howled outside, and thunder rumbled ominously. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the house, followed by the smell of smoke. "Fire!" Tommy's father shouted, springing into action. "We need to get out now." Panic set in as the family scrambled to escape. The flames spread quickly, engulfing the old wooden structure. In the chaos, Tommy felt a familiar warmth in his hand. He looked down to see Guardian glowing faintly, its button eyes shimmering with an otherworldly light. "Follow me," Tommy yelled, his voice clear and strong despite the fear gripping his heart. He clutched Guardian tightly and led his family through the smoke-filled house, guided by an instinct he couldn't explain. As they reached the front door, a beam collapsed, blocking their path. The flames roared around them, and it seemed like all hope was lost. But Guardian's glow intensified, and the doll seemed to guide Tommy's hand to a hidden latch in the wall. A small door swung open, revealing a narrow passageway. "This way," Tommy urged, leading his family through the passage and out into the safety of the rain-soaked night. They emerged in the backyard, gasping for air, the crackling flames consuming their home behind them. Once the fire was extinguished and the danger had passed, Tommy's parents held him close, tears of relief streaming down their faces. "Tommy, how did you know about that passage?" his father asked, his voice trembling. Tommy held up Guardian, now looking as ordinary and raggedy as ever. "Guardian showed me." His parents exchanged stunned glances but didn't question it further. They were just grateful to be alive and together. In the days that followed, the family sorted through the wreckage of their home, salvaging what little they could. Among the charred remains, they found an old journal, miraculously untouched by the flames. The journal belonged to Tommy's great-grandmother, a kind-hearted sorceress who had created Guardian to protect children in times of need. As they read through the journal, they learned about the enchantments placed on the doll. Guardian was meant to ward off evil, protect from harm, and guide those in danger to safety. It had been passed down through generations, each time finding a child in need of its protection. Tommy's parents were awestruck. The stories they had dismissed as folklore were true, and the doll that had saved their son and their family was indeed special. From that day on, Guardian held a place of honor in their new home. Tommy's parents, once skeptical, became firm believers in the doll's protective powers. They shared the story with friends and family, passing down the legend of Guardian and its miraculous deeds. Years passed, and Tommy grew up, but he never forgot the doll that had saved his life. When he had children of his own, he told them the story of Guardian, ensuring that the doll's legacy would continue. The family kept Guardian as a cherished heirloom, a symbol of hope and protection. And true to its enchantment, Guardian continued to watch over them, its button eyes ever vigilant, its stitched smile a comforting presence in times of trouble. Through generations, Guardian remained a steadfast protector, a silent guardian ensuring the safety of the family it loved. The small, ragged doll, with its mysterious origins and magical powers, became a legend in the rural town, a beacon of light in a world often shrouded in darkness. And so, the tale of the Guardian doll lived on, a story of magic, love, and the unbreakable bond between a family and their extraordinary protector. However, not all was as serene as it seemed. Over the years, a darker side to Guardian's protective nature began to reveal itself. Though the doll protected the family from external threats, it became increasingly possessive. It started with small incidents. Tommy's daughter, Rayleigh, feeling a cold presence in her room, or the family dog refusing to go near the doll. One night, Rayleigh awoke to find Guardian not on the shelf but sitting on her bed, its button eyes reflecting the moonlight. She screamed, and her parents rushed in, finding the doll exactly where it should be, dismissing it as a nightmare. But Rayleigh was sure Guardian had moved. As the incidents grew more frequent, Tommy began to worry. The journal mentioned nothing about Guardian's protectiveness turning sinister. He started to keep the doll locked away in a cabinet, hoping to ease the growing tension in the house. But Guardian always found a way out, reappearing in odd places, as if it were watching and waiting. One evening, a violent storm hit, and the power went out. The house plunged into darkness, and the whispers began. Soft at first, barely audible, but growing louder, more insistent. Tommy, flashlight in hand, searched for the source, dread pooling in his stomach. He found Rayleigh huddled in a corner, Guardian clutched in her arms, her eyes wide with terror. "Daddy," Guardian said, "we're not safe," she whispered. Tommy took the doll from her, feeling its familiar warmth. But this time it felt different, darker, more oppressive. He decided it was time to end Guardian's reign over their lives. Gathering his courage, he built a bonfire in the backyard, determined to destroy the doll once and for all. As the flames roared, he threw Guardian into the fire. The doll's button eyes seemed to glow with an unnatural light as it was engulfed by the flames. For a moment, the air was filled with an eerie screech, and the flames turned a sickly green. Then, as suddenly as it started, it was over. The fire returned to its normal color, and the doll was reduced to ashes. Tommy sighed in relief, thinking the nightmare was finally over. But as he turned to go back inside, he felt a cold hand grip his shoulder. He spun around, heart pounding, but saw nothing. The whispers returned, louder than ever, echoing in his mind. That night, as the family slept, the ashes of Guardian stirred. In the darkness, the doll began to reform, its button eyes glinting malevolently. By morning, it was whole again, sitting on the shelf as if nothing had happened. Tommy knew then that Guardian was not just a protector but a curse. It would never let them go. The family was bound to the doll, their fates intertwined. Guardian's protection came at a cost they were only beginning to understand. The following weeks were filled with a growing sense of dread. Guardian's presence became more oppressive, its influence spreading like a dark cloud over the household. Accidents became more frequent, and the whispers more insistent. The family dog disappeared one night, and Rayleigh fell seriously ill, her condition baffling the doctors. Desperate, Tommy turned to the journal for answers. Hidden in the final pages, he found a warning. The Guardian protects, but it also binds. To break the curse, one must willingly sacrifice all they hold dear. Tommy realized what he had to do. One stormy night, as the whispers reached a crescendo, he gathered his family in the living room. Holding Guardian tightly, he explained the curse and the necessary sacrifice. Tears streamed down their faces, but they understood. With heavy hearts, they packed their belongings, leaving the house and Guardian behind. As they drove away, Tommy felt the doll's presence growing fainter, the whispers dying away. They found a new home in a distant town, hoping to start anew. Years later, Tommy's family thrived, free from the dark influence of Guardian. But they never forgot the doll that had once protected and nearly destroyed them. And in the old house, now abandoned and overgrown, Guardian waited, its button eyes gleaming, for the next family to claim it and continue the cycle.